It was the summer of my 15th year, and life seemed simple. My family decided to visit my aunt's house for a weekend getaway. Her place always held a nostalgic charm, nestled in the countryside, surrounded by vast open fields. My excitement wasn't just about the place, but about seeing my cousin Elena. As soon as we arrived, Eleanor and I made plans for a movie night and a sleepover. By the time evening fell, we hurried to the local store to grab some snacks. The air was thick and hot, buzzing with the sounds of crickets and distant rustling leaves. On our way back, a man called out to us from across the street. He was holding something, our dropped bag of chips. His appearance seemed harmless, neatly dressed with a polite smile. He handed the chips back with a courteous gesture. While Elena hesitated, I thanked him and took the bag. Something in his gaze lingered, though a fleeting coldness behind his warm demeanor. Back at my aunt's house, we settled into the cozy living room. My aunt's home was old-fashioned, with creaking wooden floors and large iron doors for security. The front entrance had two doors, an inner wooden one, often left open for airflow, and an outer iron grill, always locked. The night deepened as we started our movie marathon. The cool breeze wafted through the iron door, carrying the scent of grass and faint hints of rain. Around midnight, we heard a faint sound, a soft thud echoing from the corridor near the front door. Elena paused the movie. "Did you lock the iron door?" she asked me. My heart skipped. I couldn't recall. She got up to check, her movements slow and hesitant. A minute passed, then another. The silence grew suffocating. "Elena?" I called out. No response. I stood up, anxiety prickling my skin. As I approached the corridor, my blood froze. There, on the floor, lay Eleanor unconscious. And standing over her was the same man from earlier, now wearing a mask. The man's eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he lunged. I screamed and bolted down the hallway, my heart pounding so hard it drowned out all other sounds. The house felt like a labyrinth as I ran blindly into the kitchen, slamming the door shut and locking it. My mother and aunt were there, startled by my sudden entrance. I managed to blurt out, "There's a man in the house. Elena's hurt." The banging on the kitchen door began almost immediately. The sound was relentless, metal against wood, as though he intended to tear the door off its hinges. Panic surged. Our phones were in the living room, out of reach. The banging stopped abruptly, followed by a chilling silence. My mother whispered, "He's gone, for now." "I have to help Elena," I said, my voice trembling. My aunt grabbed my arm, but I shook free. Grabbing a heavy plate from the kitchen rack, I braced myself, unlocking the door quietly. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from the flickering TV screen. I moved cautiously toward the living room. Elena was still lying there. The man was nowhere in sight. As I bent to check on her, a cold hand grabbed my ankle. He had been hiding behind the couch. I turned and smashed the plate into his face. Blood sprayed as he staggered back, groaning. I grabbed Eleanor's arm and dragged her toward the kitchen. She groaned softly, starting to regain consciousness. Inside the kitchen, I locked the door again. Eleanor stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked confused but unharmed. I finally managed to grab my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. My voice shook as I explained the situation. "Stay on the line," the operator said. "Help is on the way." The banging started again, louder this time. The man was trying to break through. My mother and aunt piled furniture against the door while I held a knife, ready to defend us. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the sound of sirens filled the air, and the banging stopped. The man fled, but the police quickly arrived, surrounding the property. The police caught the intruder in the backyard, struggling to climb the fence. When they unmasked him, I gasped. It was the same man from earlier, the one who had returned our chips with a kind smile. "Do you know him?" the officer asked. I nodded, explaining the encounter. The officer's expression darkened. "He's been on our radar for months. A known kidnapper targeting young girls. You're lucky to be alive." The revelation sent chills down my spine. He had followed us from the store, waited for the right moment, and infiltrated our home. The thought of what could have happened if I hadn't acted haunted me. For weeks I couldn't sleep properly. Every noise felt like a potential threat. Elena and I avoided going out alone, and my aunt installed cameras around the house. The incident became a family tale, retold during gatherings with an air of disbelief and fear. But for me, it was more than a story. It was a lesson. Never trust a stranger, no matter how kind they seem. 2 years later, I was driving through a small town late at night when I saw a man sitting near a bridge. He looked eerily familiar. As I slowed down, he turned his head toward me, and my heart stopped. It was him, the kidnapper. Or at least it looked like him. But that was impossible. He was serving time in prison. I sped away, my pulse racing. Was it a hallucination, a ghost, or had he somehow escaped? The questions plagued me as I drove, and to this day I still don't know the answer.